World's worst peacetime maritime disaster. It is not the sinking of the Titanic. It is this ship, the ill-fated Doña Paz, that just 5 days before Christmas in 1987 sailed into infamy with a loss of possibly 4,000 souls, many of them burned alive in this inferno at sea. How can a passenger ferry sailing in calm water end up as Asia's Titanic? Passenger ferries like the Doña Paz were among the cheapest and the most popular ways to travel in the Philippines, a country in Southeast Asia comprising over 7,000 islands. Just 5 days before Christmas, hundreds of people boarded the Doña Paz for a 24-hour voyage that will take them from the island of Leyte to the capital of the Philippines, Manila. The Doña Paz was authorized to carry a maximum load of 1,518 passengers. But on the night of the accident, survivors say there may have been more than 4,000 people on board. Up to 4 people shared makeshift cots, while hundreds sat on the floor of the 3-deck ship. A machine gunner and survivor of many battles in the provinces, Luzgardo Nieto was looking forward to a family reunion in Manila. It was so crowded, Luzgardo Nieto said, the Doña Paz tilted to one side.
Before I rode the ship, I noticed it was tilted to one side. I told myself it must really be loaded, but it could not be avoided since it was nearing Christmas. It was really tilted. Inside the ship, there was no room for the people to move.
Many of the passengers that boarded the Doña Paz were entire families with young children. It was going to be an exciting adventure for Aludia Baksal, only 18 years old. She decided to skip her Christmas party at school and join her father, Salvador, to spend Christmas in the country's capital. But only minutes into the voyage, Aludia realized the journey itself would be far from glamorous.
There were so many people. We were like cockroaches or ants. There were just so many of us. People were getting restless. The children were crying and it was very noisy. There was a family beside me. I felt for the children because this family was crammed into one cot and they had so much luggage. The passengers could not sleep because there was no space to lie down. There was hardly any space to sit down.
43-year-old fisherman Salvador told Aludia not to leave their family's only cot. As Aludia guards their belongings, Salvador searched the ship for food. In the kitchen, the situation was far worse.
It was a struggle to get food, so many passengers didn't get to eat. Those who were weak, old, not as alert as the rest, and those who had a hard time walking, those people went without food because they had no choice. They suffered through it.
Doña Paz had an official passenger list of 1,493, with a crew of 59 on board. But the list may not have included as many as 1,000 children below the age of 4, and many passengers who paid their fare after boarding. Pedro Surima was only 17 at that time. He had come aboard without a ticket.
They didn't count all the passengers because the crowd just got too big. At first, they asked for your ticket before they let you aboard the ship. But later on, anyone could just get on. A lot of chance passengers were able to ride the ship.
Like many other passengers, Pedro Surima's name would not appear in the ship's manifest. Also not in the passenger list were Philippine military soldiers and police units on their way home for the holidays. They came aboard in the hundreds, some still bearing weapons and wearing their uniforms. Lutgardo Nieto was one of them.
There were many soldiers on board. All were headed home to their families because it was Christmas. I think about 1,000 soldiers died because that's how many there are in a battalion.
There were many soldiers on board. I know because they were still in uniform. They walked around the ship carrying their rifles. There were a lot of them.
It is believed that more than 4,000 passengers may have boarded the Doña Paz. The ship was going at a steady pace of just 26 kilometers per hour. Passengers were settling in for the night. The Doña Paz was scheduled to arrive in Manila by morning. But unknown to those on board, another vessel was heading straight at them. And this was no ordinary ship. It was a tanker loaded with over 8,000 barrels of fuel. Just 5 days before Christmas, the Doña Paz crashed into the record books as a disaster even greater than the sinking of the Titanic. The Doña Paz was authorized to carry 1,518 passengers, but on the night of the accident, survivors say there may have been more than 4,000 passengers crammed into the 3-deck ferry. It was 10 p.m. The Doña Paz was on schedule to arrive in Manila by morning. Most passengers were getting ready to sleep. But another ship, the MT Vector, was heading straight towards the Doña Paz. Aboard with his daughter Aludia, Salvador Baxal saw the ship coming.
I was standing on the side of the ship near the gangway. I was peeing. I noticed that ship immediately. I thought it was a fishing boat because it appeared small and with many lights. But after a while, it seemed to be getting too close to the Doña Paz. I said to myself, we're going to crash.
Three close friends from the province, Almario Balanay, Generoso Batola, and Morris Apura, decided to sleep on the roof deck under the stars.
Since we did not have a cot, we decided to stay on the roof deck. The three of us were on the roof deck all day until evening.
We had just settled in for the night, but after around 5 minutes, we heard a loud sound and felt something bump into us.
I heard a huge sound, almost like thunder. I immediately got up.
With no sound of alarm and without any warning from the ship's officer and crew, the Doña Paz collided with the MT Vector. The passengers inside the Doña Paz did not know that they had slammed into another ship, and it was no ordinary vessel. The MT Vector was an oil tanker carrying 8,000 barrels of gasoline and kerosene. Its bow had rammed into the port or left side of the Doña Paz, right where the engine room and main switchboard were located. The crash knocked out the engines and caused a short circuit, plunging the Doña Paz into total darkness. Military soldier Lutgardo Nieto was on the upper deck when he heard the crash.
It sounded like steel going clang, clang. There was a blackout and all the lights went out. I looked at the right side of the Doña Paz. The tail end of our ship was on fire. Then I heard an explosion coming from the engine room.
I kept blinking and rubbing my eyes, thinking I was dreaming. I ran to the other side and saw a smaller ship burning.
We ran towards the side of the ship to see what was going on. We saw the ship burning.
The fire spread quickly, and within seconds it was everywhere. The passengers panicked, stampeding down the corridors in near total darkness. According to eyewitnesses, many of the passengers tried to escape the flames, fumes, and smoke by going deeper into the ship. They ran down to the lower deck cabins only to get lost in the maze of panic.
The passengers were in total panic. They ran around, maybe trying to get to their companions who were on other parts of the ship. I felt so much sorrow. Those poor people, there were so many who were going to die tonight.
While some passengers were trapped inside the burning ship, hundreds of others near the ship's railings jumped overboard.
I ran back to my daughter Aludia and told her there's a fire. Aludia slumped to the floor and started crying. I told her to be quiet and we were going to jump overboard. It was too late to get a life jacket. There was too much smoke, which was very black.
I could not breathe from the smoke. The smoke was thick, very black. I felt that I would die. I saw Papa getting ready to jump. I held on to his shoulder. He gave me a look that said, "Hang on, we're going to jump."
They did not know that the Doña Paz had collided with an oil tanker carrying a deadly cargo of kerosene, diesel, and gasoline, and that the sea they were jumping into was on fire.
to myself, this is an inferno. A fire in the middle of the sea. We would probably die here.
Military soldier Lutgardo Nieto was also among the first to jump overboard.
It went pshoo. Around a minute after, the ship exploded, right where the engine was. Boom. The fire became huge, followed by an explosion. The sea was on fire. Boom. The Vector also exploded. The oil drums were flying, and they fell and hit the sea. Gasoline and diesel spread in the water. I felt that was it for us. All we did was to swim and swim. Every time we saw the waves that were on fire come our way, we dove deep into the water.
Hundreds of passengers were able to jump overboard, including the trio of Almario Balanay, Generoso Batola, and Morris Apura. They watched the last seconds of the Doña Paz. The waters surrounding the sinking ships were covered with oil, gasoline, and kerosene. They must dive into the ocean to escape the flaming surface and swim their way outside the deadly ring of fire.
The fire was huge. The flames grew to almost a kilometer wide. As the wind blew, the flames grew even bigger.
What I did was to stay underwater to avoid the flames. When I felt the surface was hot, I swam further away to avoid it. Finally, when I reached a safe spot away from the flames, I started to cry. I was crying, asking myself why this happened. I wanted to take the bus. If only we had taken the bus.
I was grieved because I swam by the body of a child. He looked around 3 years old to me. His body was burnt from the fire. I touched the child's head, but his eyes were not moving. I lifted him twice, but he did not move. So I let him go. I was overwhelmed with sadness because of that.
For those who jumped from a burning ship to a burning sea, the nightmare was just beginning.
Under the sea, you could feel the heat from the fire above. Your body would feel it was boiling. I thought I would explode from the heat.
A fisherman and experienced diver, Salvador watched helplessly as bodies flowed past him. He feared the worst for his own daughter, Alutia.
If my child was able to jump, if she were alive, she would shout.
I thought of killing myself. I could no longer bear being in the water. I was too tired from keeping afloat, and I had a hard time breathing. I planned to sink into the water and just drown myself. But I also kept going back up to the surface when I needed to take a breath. My face got burned, my hands got burned here, and here too.
Suddenly, Aludia heard a familiar voice. It was her father, Salvador.
I heard my father's voice. I shouted, "Papa!" He was shocked to hear my voice.
I'm here, Alud. Where are you?
I replied, "Over here."
Where are you?
Papa was surprised that I was just near him. He grabbed hold of my hand, but it was burned and my skin just peeled right off. It was very painful. I asked him not to touch my hand.
Reunited with his daughter in the burning water, Salvador felt a surge of relief and a strange sense of peace.
It flashed across my mind that I was ready to die at that moment. I finally found her and heard her voice again. We could now die together. In the meantime, I vowed never to leave her side.
They would swim for more than an hour in what seemed like an endless wait for rescue that was nowhere in sight. In the mild wind and calm currents, the sea kept on burning as many lives died out.
I heard screaming and crying, especially when the people caught fire. Then, the crying stopped. Later, we heard moaning, and then there was silence. The sea became quiet.
In the days to come, the real horror of the tragedy became clear. It is believed that nearly 4,000 passengers boarded the Doña Paz. Only 24 would survive to tell the tale. And as the search for bodies ended, the demand for answers began. It was the world's worst peacetime maritime disaster, a collision between the passenger ferry Doña Paz and an oil tanker in the Philippines. But the Philippine Coast Guard did not learn of the accident until more than 8 hours later. And it took another 8 hours to launch an official search and rescue operation. Luckily, help arrives in the form of a passing ship, the Don Claudio. By then, the survivors have been swimming for more than an hour. Father and daughter, Salvador and Aludia, saw the light from afar.
A ship arrived. I told Papa, "There's a ship. There's light." Papa said, "Raise your hand so they can see that there's a woman." So I did, and all the others followed.
They tried to pull us up with a rope. I told them we are too exhausted, we cannot hang on to it. So they threw the net. Aludia and I climbed up using the net.
Only aboard the Don Claudio would Salvador realize just how horribly his daughter Aludia had burned in the water. She was suffering from third-degree burns on her face and arms. Today, her right eye still bears the scar of the flames. The trio of Almario Balanay, Enrosa Batola, and Morris Apura would reunite aboard the Don Claudio.
I saw Morris stretched out on a dining table. His body was full of burns. He was alive and breathing, but his body was burned like charcoal.
When they pulled me up, my skin started peeling off, here and here. Only then did I feel the pain.
The doctor told him he was burned badly and that he should lie down. I took care of him while he was sleeping. His burns were showing. In fact, some parts were dripping.
Out of nearly 4,000 passengers who may have boarded the Doña Paz, only 24 survived.
I'm the only soldier who survived. The rest died. I guess they drowned or were eaten by sharks.
Days after the collision, the coasts of the nearest island of Mindoro were littered with bloated corpses washed ashore. Villagers dug holes in the sand to bury them. Black with burns and slick with oil, the bodies were mangled and almost naked. Small fishing boats also came to shore with bodies trapped in their fishing nets. Villages watched in grief as boat after boat arrived with their terrible catch. Grief-stricken and outraged relatives stormed the office of the Sulpicio Shipping Lines, owner of the Doña Paz. Many names of the missing would not appear in the ship's manifest. Relatives were shocked when Sulpicio Lines declares that the ferry was not overcrowded.
The number of passengers as officially certified by the Coast Guard after a head count is 1,493. It is not true that the vessel was overcrowded.
But the lawyer for oil tanker MT Vector asserts that overcrowding on the Doña Paz was a crucial factor.
This vessel is overloaded. The maneuverability of this vessel is very difficult in the sense that you cannot easily move this or turn this left or right. Why? Because it may least. No?
You're saying now that overloading may actually be a crucial thing in this?
Yes, it's a crucial thing. But this tanker did not realize that this vessel could no longer avoid them, no? Because all the time this tanker believes that it will turn, no? Yeah. But because of the difficult maneuverability of this vessel, what happened is they could not turn anymore.
There were 1,493 passengers on board. Now, aside from that, the number of people on board did not have any causal connection with the collision itself.
Official investigators from the Board of Marine Inquiry soon realized that answers would not come easily. All of the officers on board the Doña Paz were killed in the collision. 2 crew members from the Vector survived, but both had been asleep when the crash happened. For answers, investigators looked to the past, and the Vector had an interesting history. A ship captain who had piloted the MT Vector told investigators that the steering rudder was defective and difficult to maneuver. So difficult that it took 2 people to manually steer the wheel. With the defective steering rudder, the Vector would have approached the MV Doña Paz, zigzagging like a snake in the water. The zigzagging motion would have been confusing, especially in the night, when sea vessels use different colored lights to signal their position to oncoming ships. When the Vector shows the green light, it indicates that it will pass by the right side of the Doña Paz. A red light would indicate that it is moving towards the left side of the Doña Paz. And the white light shows that it's heading straight on. Because the Vector steered from left to right, the Doña Paz would see lights that suddenly change from red to white, green and white, then back to red and white, confusing the watch officer aboard the Doña Paz. Investigators found other disturbing problems. The tanker was undermanned and the officers and crew underqualified. The Vector's master did not have a chief mate license and was only licensed to serve as second mate. The chief engineer had no license at all, and the Vector had no qualified lookout on the bridge. Investigators questioned how the Vector was allowed to sail at all. They soon discovered that the Vector had sailed without a certificate of inspection and Coast Guard license, basic documents that declare ships in the Philippines to be seaworthy. The evidence mounted against the Vector, but one crucial point mystified experts. Even if the Vector had approached in a winding motion, why didn't the Doña Paz simply avoid it? The international rules at sea state that if 2 ships are on high risk of a head-on collision, each must alter her course to starboard or right side to avoid each other. Why did the Doña Paz and Vector get too close? Commodore Benjamin Mata was himself a shipmaster before he became a leading expert in maritime safety.
It's like a turtle ramming into the belly of a porpoise. How that can happen is really puzzling to me. I cannot understand why the Doña Paz did not take evasive action and just leave this side.
The ships were moving slow, the Doña Paz at 26 kilometers per hour, the Vector at 8 kilometers per hour. They were surrounded by wide open sea, plenty of space to avoid a crash. Could it be that no one was watching?
The officer on watch on the tanker might have fallen asleep. In the same manner, the officer on watch on the Doña Paz also could have fallen asleep. Because why did he allow his ship to come very close to the tanker? When you have so much space on both sides to maneuver, to get out of the way of this ship that is showing a different set of lights every 5 minutes.
All the officers and crew of the Doña Paz went down with the ship, and the whole truth may never be known. Experts also wondered why the Doña Paz and Vector did not communicate with each other just before the crash.
Well, that again is a requirement. It's an international requirement that all ships must be equipped with VHF radio. In situations where ships are in sight of each other, they can use the radio to communicate and ask the other ship what his intentions are. And this should be done long before a possible collision will occur.
The Vector was discovered to have an expired radio license, and the radio license of Doña Paz turned out to be fake. Unbelievably, the official investigation ruled out what could have been the most spectacular aspect of the Doña Paz tragedy. The reported overcrowding of almost 4,000 passengers on board the Doña Paz. The Board of Marine Inquiry dismissed the eyewitness account of the survivors. They ruled that the eyewitnesses were not qualified to count the number of actual passengers aboard and were just making estimates. Investigators took the word of the Philippine Coast Guard boarding team, who insisted to the very end that they conducted a proper head count. Many were shocked that Sulpicio Lines was not held liable for the possible overloading of the Doña Paz. The ruling drew howls of protest from the relatives of unlisted and still missing passengers. Families of each victim received $400 from Sulpicio Lines as compensation. Those who were not on the ship's manifest got nothing. Vector lawyer Jose Sison points out a potential conflict of interest in the official investigation. The Board of Marine Inquiry, or BMI, was under the umbrella of the Philippine Coast Guard, the same body responsible for ensuring proper passenger loads on ferries.
I think BMI can come up with that conclusion only. The BMI is under the Philippine Coast Guard, no? So the only way they could exculpate the Philippine Coast Guard is to exonerate Sulpicio.
Why?
Because if they find all these violations of Sulpicio, these are violations committed by Sulpicio because it was allowed by Coast Guard.
But according to the Philippine Board of Marine Inquiry, even if the Doña Paz was overcrowded, this scenario had nothing to do with the collision.
We have been saying all along that the cause of the tragedy is not overcrowding or overloading of the vessel. The cause of the tragedy, let's face it, is the collision. Now, the center of focus should be who is at fault in that collision? And then we go into the minor issue, which is overcrowding.
Ultimately, investigators put the blame on the vector. But one burning question remained. Why didn't the captain and crew of the Doña Paz take evasive action? Shocking allegations later surfaced from survivors.
So they were having fun?
They were having fun, not the passengers.
Are you talking about the first-class passengers?
I'm talking about the crew of the ship.
In the greatest sea disaster to ever happen in peacetime, a passenger ferry collided with an oil tanker. There were only 24 survivors, and the world still looked to them for answers about what truly happened aboard the Doña Paz. But the survivors would have more questions, each more troubling than the last. Witness told investigators about the party being held aboard the Doña Paz just minutes before the crash.
Nakita ko sa taas yung gabi na yun.
I heard music and laughter. I guess there was dancing up there.
So they were having fun?
That's what I noticed.
Who was having a party?
They were having fun, not the passengers. They were having fun.
Yung nasa taas, hindi yung pasaheros.
Are you talking about the first-class passengers?
I'm talking about the crew of the ship.
Another survivor, military soldier Lutgardo Nieto, recalls that a fellow soldier had told him about the same party at the bridge, and that disturbingly, the captain was among them.
The soldier told me that he'd been going around the ship, and he was specific that he came from a party at the bridge. He said, "Do you know that the captain is there at the party?" I thought he meant a military captain. But he said, "No, I mean the captain of the ship. He's at the party." I told him not to mind so much because I'm sure a chief mate relieved the captain. But after a few minutes, we crashed. I thought to myself, what the soldier told me must have been true.
Who was manning the bridge when the accident happened? Was it a qualified officer? According to some survivors, an apprentice mate may have been steering the ship. The truth may never be known. In the years after the Doña Paz tragedy, shipping disasters continued to plague the Philippines. In 1988, nearly a year after the tragedy, the Doña Marilyn, a sister ship of the Doña Paz, sank off the central province of Leyte, killing some 300 lives. Were no lessons learned from one of the world's worst maritime disasters? It has been 20 years since that fateful December day. But for the survivors, those terrible memories will never fade.
Nag-land travel kami. Sumakay din. Kailangan madali lang. From Matnong to Alin lang eh.
These days, traveling by land or air is easy and a lot faster. So to take the ferry from Manila to Leyte, No. I don't want to ride a ship again. I'm afraid to get on because if it sinks, I may not be as fortunate. I'll just take the plane. It's faster. I don't want to ride a ship again. I won't, even if it's for free.
As I was there watching it happen, I prayed to God that He let me live because my family needs me. They depend on me, and I promised to serve them till my last breath. They are the reason why I fought to stay alive that night.
She's one of the largest ships sailing our oceans. She's as tall as a 10-story building. And in a year, she travels 2/3 the distance to the moon.
Well, it's his job to keep out of my way, but he's not moving.
In 12 months, she carries nearly 200,000 containers, a cargo worth $4.5 billion. Cargo that must be delivered intact and on time. Yet this huge ship has a crew of only 22 who have to be ready for any conditions, any emergency.
All ship personnel to your boat station. See any lights?
And must be ready to defend their ship against desperate marauders, modern-day pirates. The Atlanta's mission? Transporting and protecting a mountain of very valuable cargo. Come, experience life aboard a maritime megastructure. Witness the mechanics and machinations of life at sea.
Okay, I'll go ahead, thank you.
And visit the bustling ports that feed the ever-growing world of trade. Welcome aboard the OOCL Atlanta, a mega ship, a true... The Atlanta is one of the latest and largest class of container ships. Known as Post-Panamax, she and her kind are too wide to sail through the Panama Canal. If she were a naval vessel, she'd be the equivalent of an aircraft carrier with a crew of several thousand men. The Atlanta has a crew of just 22, ranging from a handful of ordinary seamen who work to keep the Atlanta shipshape at all times. 5 engineers keep the ship's engines, power plants, and operating systems up and running. And a team of 4 officers work in shifts around the clock. Junior officers stand watch and keep a close eye on the weather. Second Officer Law is responsible for navigation and communications. First Officer Jonathan oversees all the crew, the safety, and daily running of the ship and all cargo load. At the team's head is a captain who's spent all his working life at sea.
Starboard 10. Starboard 10.
Captain Roger Llewellyn is a man with salt water coursing through his veins. And over the years, he's developed some interesting sleeping habits.
One eye open, always. We sleep with one eye open because at 25, 26 knots, you've got to jump out and up there.
Up there is the bridge, and that's where the sailor who never sleeps has spent most of his last 30 years. He's sailed every ocean on the planet and visited every nation that borders the sea. Right now, the Atlanta is in the Malacca Straits, heading from Port Kelang, Malaysia to Singapore, then north to Hong Kong, It's a hectic schedule on a crowded route.
050.
A lot of traffic not doing what they're supposed to do, a lot of traffic not reporting. So you've got to have eyes at the back of your head. You've got to keep an eye out for everything moving, especially small coastal traffic. We've got one here, not reported, you see. He's trying to get across the bow.
When the Atlanta blows her horn, you'd be well advised to move out of her way. Her vital statistics are staggering. From bow to stern, the Atlanta is 323 meters long. That's over 1,000 feet. In fact, if you could tip the Atlanta up on her bow, she'd edge out the Eiffel Tower. The area of her top deck is greater than 2 football fields. Fully laden, the Atlanta weighs more than 300 jumbo jets. On her normal route, she carries cargo from Southeast Asia to the west coast of America and back again every 42 days.
These ocean giants make the Earth very small. It is a village, because one minute we're in the east, next minute we're in the west. Very little time between the two. So we're constantly plying the world with manufactured goods.
Mega ships like the Atlanta help keep the wheels of global commerce turning. Over half the world's cargo is carried in containers. In 1 year, nearly 20 million containers are moved a total of 300 million times. It's a payload worth almost $5 trillion. The Atlanta may be loaded down, but she still has to be on time.
She runs to schedule for thousands and thousands of miles. She'll arrive on time.
In Singapore, containers are arriving from all around the region. Some have a date with the Atlanta. These transfers must be planned with military precision. It's a chain where a weak link means a cargo gets delayed, or even worse, lost. The bottom line, the cargo must be at port waiting when the Atlanta docks. Two particular pieces of cargo due for the Atlanta started their journey several thousand kilometers away in Australia. One is precious and fragile, a shipment of 999 cartons of wine from the lush vineyards of South Australia. The other is also a gourmet delight, but this time highly perishable, a container load of sweet, succulent prawns. Both the wine and seafood are bound for shops and restaurants in Hong Kong, and both will require extreme care and constant supervision. The Atlanta's due in Singapore in less than 24 hours, but there's a problem.
Third mate.
Yes, that's correct, over.
Third mate. Yeah, obviously Atlanta, the master here. I sent it yesterday and I sent it again this morning when I left Port Calais.
Port procedures are very strict.
I give up.
Without the right paperwork, ships can't enter a country's waters.
Third mate, keep him there, tell him. Instead of the last 10 ports which you've already got, I'll just send you Port Calais.
Okay, no problem, no problem.
Aye, aye.
The captain must keep to schedule. He has 2,200 containers to move in Singapore. And he must get there on time. The Atlanta is steaming towards Singapore Harbor and the planned 2,200 container moves. This megaship is purpose-built for one thing only, to carry cargo. A mountain of cargo. All up, she can carry 8,063 20-foot containers.
These are the lashing bars and the turnbuckles. These are 20 foot. You can load 20s and you can load 40s, either or. But they still need lashing forward and aft. Keep them fixed in position.
Even though she hasn't yet reached her full load capacity, the captain still likes to check on the containers from the top to the very bottom.
Where we are now, we're 13.6 meters underwater now. Down here, the containers are stacked 9 high. So they go 9 high, and then on deck, another 6 to 8 high. So roughly, we're stacking 17 high.
From the very bottom of the stack, over 13 meters below the water, the containers rise over 44 meters. On land, it would look like a city block rising 10 stories. If laid end to end, those containers would stretch further than an Olympic marathon, nearly 50 kilometers. A little over 40 years ago, it was a different story. Products like wine would have been transported in a variety of simple boxes, and moving frozen foods over long distances was simply out of the question. Then, in the late 50s, an American, Malcolm McLean, came up with an idea that would revolutionize world trade. By packing all goods into modular containers similar in design and dimension, they could be easily transported anywhere in the world by road, rail, or sea. As the use of these containers has grown, so has the size of the ships that carry them. The Atlanta is one of 12 SX-class ships built for OOCL by the Samsung shipyard in Korea. It took over 8,000 workers nearly 9 months to build her, at a cost of over $150 million.
She is the largest ship ever built when she was contract. And she had been installed the largest main engine when available in that time.
For the engine power that he was given, for the speed he wants, he's done, for me, a great job.
When first launched, the SX class held the world record as the largest container ship ever built.
We use the high tensile steel to get the minimum light ship weight so that we can maximize the cargo loading capability.
It's that combination of high tensile steel and the design of the hull that gives the Atlanta her enormous load-carrying ability.
This that runs the full length of the ship, it's a very important structural member for stresses, because you must remember there's so many big openings that the ship is bending all the time. In this area, when you've got 95,000 horsepower pushing this ship, the pressure is enormous. You can see that the frame structure is very heavy. So this is a high stress area, especially in heavy weather.
The real pride of the Atlanta is the power plant. This is one of the world's biggest diesel engines. A 12-cylinder turbocharged monster. Its sheer size is breathtaking. The engine fills a room 6 stories high. 6 stories of incredible power. The engine peaks at 104 revolutions per minute, but generates a mind-blowing 93,120 brake horsepower. That's over 700 times more power than an average family car. And all that power adds up to one thing: speed through the water. She can average nearly 25 nautical miles an hour. That's fast enough to water ski behind, as long as you can handle that huge stern wash. While at sea, the Atlanta can notch up over 570 nautical miles a day. But a speed like that comes at a price.
This ship, she burns a lot of fuel. Full speed, she'll burn 230, 240 tons a day.
That's a staggering 10 tons of diesel every hour the ship is underway. She may be thirsty, but she's also a clean engine. And that starts with clean fuel. A series of filters remove impurities, before the diesel is pumped into a holding tank and heated to 129 degrees. Hot fuel and gas is an explosive mix.
Number 7 cargo hold, number 7 cargo hold, the fire alarm's gone off.
No other sound strikes fear into the heart of the mariner like the fire alarm.
Starboard side, bay 1, starboard side. Let me know.
A fire at sea can spell disaster. A small spark can soon become a fireball. The crew have to be ready to act in an instant.
In the ocean, you're on your own, you've got nobody. We've got no shore facilities, no emergency services. We just rely on our own training and our own emergency services. But a fire is the worst.
In an emergency like this, First Mate Jonathan rallies the crew. The captain calls the shots.
We are now proceeding forward for investigation.
Aye, aye. On deck, please.
Getting it right can mean the difference between survival and disaster.
Both those are ready. Okay, I'm going to start the emergency fire pump.
I got that.
The crew have to work together closely. When the emergency pumps come on, they come on strong. Seawater is pumped onto a fire at a rate of over 4,000 liters per minute through high-pressure hoses.
Training every Saturday afternoon, 2 hours of training every Saturday. We have fire drills, forward, galley, accommodation, all over the ship. Within a space of 3 months, we'll have covered every part of the ship in a fire drill. And 95% of all fires at sea are in the engine room.
Maybe down at the CO2 room, Do you read over? No copy.
Each week, the Atlanta's crew carry out an intensive fire drill. A fire in the engine room is the most dangerous of all and cannot be fought with water. Fighting an engine room fire requires a different strategy. This room is filled with hundreds of bottles of carbon dioxide, which can be directed automatically to the engine room via a network of sprinkler systems, starving the fire of oxygen. The Atlanta has been powering her way towards Singapore, with Captain Llewellyn determined to keep her on schedule. The Atlanta's ability to maintain her top speed is thanks to her revolutionary propeller. This 85-ton, 6-bladed piece of molded alloy spinning at just 104 revolutions per minute provides enough thrust to drive her forward at 25 knots. Sitting behind that propeller is a huge rudder that plunges nearly 12 meters below the surface of the waves. It's roughly the same size as a double-decker bus. And with a surface area like that, the captain doesn't want it angled for too long. A rudder at an angle causes drag, which slows the ship down.
You need to keep the rudder movements to a minimum. So I like just to keep her within 1 degree on either side, but that depends on the sea conditions. Big swells, big following sea, you can't do that.
At the moment, the sea conditions are perfect for steering a straight line to Singapore. ETA, 0700 hours. The first sign that the Atlanta's getting closer to port is the sudden increase in sea traffic.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
One of the problems with being a giant is avoiding the dwarves of the ocean. For the captain, arrival at port is one of the most stressful parts of the journey. He has to be ready to react in an instant.
Well, it's his job to keep out of my way, but he's not moving, you see. He's still coming across. Now he's going round. Now he's going to come across my stern.
It's going to be a long day for the captain and his crew. Getting into port is just the first hurdle.
the end of, not the end of the working day, but it's because we got cargo work straight away after. But it's the end of the problems in the Singapore Strait, so we can relax our engine tested head and astern.
While the captain maneuvers the Atlanta carefully closer to port, 2,500 kilometers away, another key individual is frantically working behind the scenes. Eric Lee is the ship planner. At the head office in Hong Kong, he's using the latest in sophisticated cargo planning software. He calls all the shots when it comes to loading the Atlanta's 8,000 containers, and must make sure that every piece of cargo is ready and waiting. A miscalculation could prove costly.
The worst thing is the ship is sitting at the terminal, berthing at the terminal without any work. We lost a lot.
Eric isn't the only one who has to get his planning right. Captain Llewellyn must get to the port on time. But before he gets there, the busy waterways are going to get even busier. It's time to call in the assistance of a local expert, the pilot. Every harbor has its own secrets. Fast currents, changing tides, shallow waters. In a tricky maneuver, the Atlanta is about to pick up the man who knows these waters like the back of his hand. Zamil Nair has been a pilot in Singapore port for over 20 years.
Well, we trust him, but you got to watch what he's doing. So it's until you're actually tied up, because you can't relax.
Bringing this mega ship into dock is the most dangerous maneuver of any trip.
Dead slow at the moment.
The chain of command is strict and involves as many as 12 key individuals.
Thank you, brother. Basically, I'm working closely with the captain, ship's captain, and he's using my expertise in ship handling and local knowledge to get the ship alongside.
314, steady, sir.
Thank you. Dead slow ahead.
Dead slow ahead.
Sea Labrador, Pile Labrador. We've got a tug coming out there. It's going to be made fast at the stern on the port quarter. This tug is about 4,000 horsepower and it's a fairly big, powerful tug. So basically I'm going to swing the ship around to starboard and then backing down into the berth. Stop engines.
Stop. Engine.
With main engines stopped, the tugboat Labrador is tied to the stern of the Atlanta on the port side. Then it's dead slow ahead.
Atlanta bridge, gangway ready.
Okay, Tango 1, OCL.
Tango 1.
Will be starboard side, long side, bridge to bow, 249 meters.
249.
Okay, I see one of your crane is down. Can you check on the crane, please?
Okay.
The bigger the ship, the smaller the space, pilot.
Yep.
The bigger the ship, the smaller the space.
Stop engines.
Stop engine.
Okay, Labrador, increase the full power.
Yeah.
At the stern is the Labrador, a 4,000 horsepower tug. Up front, the Atlanta's huge electric-driven bow thruster adds another 3,350 horsepower. All up, the pilot has over 7,000 horsepower at his command. By combining the pull of the Labrador at the stern and the power of the bow thruster, the pilot cleverly spins the Atlanta into position. When the spinning is over, it's time for some precision parking.
Okay, Labrador, slow to port, Labrador.
It's the ultimate shoehorning exercise.
Dead slow ahead.
Dead slow ahead.
There's no margin for error. The Atlanta is 323 meters long. She's being parked in a space with only meters to spare.
Stop engines.
Stop engine. What have you got for it now? How much?
What about 5 meters?
5 meters, is that all?
So keep the after spring slack.
Keep spring slack as we come astern.
Even though they perform this operation hundreds of times a year, it's a tense time for all the crew.
All the way on your forward spring now. All the way forward. 2 meters, 2 meters. Should be on the road in a minute.
Position.
In position. Hold her now. Hold her on your spring.
Another successful docking for the captain and Nair, the pilot. And the moment the Atlanta docks, things swing into action as the trucks line up for loading and unloading. Singapore is one of the largest container terminals in the world, handling 17% of the world's total container trade. In 2004, over 20 million 20-foot containers passed through the port of Singapore. For every single ship, every minute in port counts. A total of 4 giant cranes start moving the Atlanta's containers at breakneck speed. The pressure is on. The Atlanta has 2,200 containers that need to be moved, and the captain's hoping it can be done in under 20 hours. This is where Eric's cargo planning is really put to the test. He has to pre-plan every move and allocate each container a specific position on the ship. No container should be moved twice. Double handling wastes time and money. So containers due to be unloaded at the next port must be stacked close to the top, while a container bound for America needs to be stacked deeper in the hold. The other major concern is keeping the ship balanced during loading. Too much weight on either side of the ship could put it in danger of capsizing. It's Jonathan, the first mate's job to keep a close eye on the Atlanta during this critical time. His computer monitors the distribution of weight around the ship and also allows him to compensate for any uneven loading. Deep in the ship's hull are a network of giant ballast tanks. By moving hundreds of tons of seawater between these tanks, Jonathan can keep the Atlanta on an even keel. To complicate this balancing act even further, the ship has to take on fuel. The Atlanta's tanks can hold over 7.5 million liters of diesel. This is a job for an expert. Bunker boats are the floating petrol stations of the port. This is the only time the Atlanta will take on diesel for the round trip from Asia to America. Today, they're taking on nearly 7,000 tons. It's an operation that will take over 6 hours. With the price of fuel around $280 a ton, this little trip to the gas station will cost the captain nearly $2 million. While the engine's shut down, Alvin, the second engineer, can check out the crankcase. There are certain advantages to working on an engine this big. It's not often a man can stand inside a crankcase to check for loose bolts or undue wear on any of the moving parts. When a cylinder has a bore of nearly 1 meter and the piston has a stroke of 2.4 meters, any wear is going to cause serious trouble. Among the 2,200 containers being moved today are the 2 that started their journey 2 weeks ago in Australia. The container carrying the latest vintage of Australian Chardonnay needs to be moved quickly, but also with care. The last containers to be loaded on board are the refrigerated containers. These reefers are carrying perishable goods. The one carrying the Australian frozen seafood has to be kept at a temperature of -18 degrees throughout the entire journey. Jonathan, the first mate, hooks them up to the ship's power supply in order to get the refrigeration units working as soon as possible. While on board, the crew will check their temperatures twice a day, every day. Below decks, the crew go on a manhunt. At dock, there's always the risk of taking on extra cargo, human cargo. Stowaways looking for a free ride to the USA. Stowaways have been known to climb mooring ropes at night and are sometimes even hiding inside the containers. If they get on board, they pose a real security threat. While the crews search for stowaways down below, up on the bridge, the officers are planning for the sea voyage ahead. It's the second mate's responsibility to plot the course. It's an intricate combination of old world tradition and new age technology. He does his initial plotting using charts, slide rule, and compass, and then transfers the data into a computer. The advanced software then links his data to the satellite navigation systems and radar. The result? The officers on the bridge can plot the ship's course and see any oncoming traffic, all in real time.
Well, the beauty of that for me is you see where you are instantly. You see exactly where the ship is. And there's many times I have to be on my own, so I need to know where she is. A ship of this size, when she's drawing 13.6, 14 meters, we need to know exactly where she is.
The search for stowaways below deck is complete, and the crew have given the bridge the all clear. Nearly 22 hours after first docking, all of the new containers are on board and are being secured for the long trip to Hong Kong. Each container is lashed to the rows above and below in a matrix which locks every single container rigidly in place. This ensures that none of the cargo, including those bottles of Australian wine, will shift if the Atlanta starts pitching in a storm at sea. A full 2 hours later than planned, but with all cargo on board and firmly secured, the Atlanta is ready to leave Singapore. Taking a giant out of port can be even more difficult than bringing one in. And of course, that clock has started ticking again.
Coming in and out of port, we're under more stress than when we're sailing out in the open sea. And we got deadlines to meet, sailing schedules. They want us there at a certain time, we can't get there. And it all adds to your level of stress.
8 ships?
8 ships, 8 ships.
As with arrival, Captain Llewellyn shares command with Zamil Nair, the pilot. In these confined waters, the bow thrusters get a full-blown workout. Nair uses all his experience. First, reversing the Atlanta before the tugboat with all of her 4,000 horsepower helps spin the Atlanta away from the docks and points her in the right direction.
Steady as she goes.
Single 4, pilot, single 4.
Steady.
Pilot, single 4.
With the Atlanta slowly increasing speed and safely on her way, Nair now needs to meet up with another incoming ship. It's a transfer that involves a hair-raising climb, followed by a brave leap to the pilot boat, all at a speed of over 8 knots. One slip could be his last. By his calculations, it's a leap of faith that he performs as many as 8 times in one working day. Once the Atlanta is out in open waters, Captain Llewellyn resumes sole command of his megaship. It will take the Atlanta 2.5 days to sail to Hong Kong from Singapore, traveling a distance of over 1,460 nautical miles. That's a lot of time at sea. Time that's taken up with regular maintenance and a strict timetable.
You must have a routine. You're keeping yourself ready and waiting for the next challenge.
Once a week, Captain Llewellyn, the first mate, and the bosun carry out inspections of every section of the Atlanta's living quarters.
Home entertainment here, cheek, mate. Home from home. Home from home.
For the captain, the Giant can only run efficiently if attention is paid to every tiny detail. That applies to every inch of the ship. While the crew's quarters are checked, the crew themselves have their own inspections to carry out. Electricity is crucial for all the ship's operating systems. The engineers are responsible for keeping all 5 3,000 kilowatt generators running smoothly. Without them, the Atlanta would be dead in the water. The refrigerated containers also rely on electricity. The crew have to check the temperature of every single reefer twice a day. It's a full-time job to keep perishables like the Australian seafood in tip-top condition. And guess what? The Atlanta can carry over 700 of these refrigerated units. Although the Atlanta is surrounded by water, none of it, of course, is drinkable. Every drop of fresh water on board is made by turning seawater into drinking water. The ship's desalination plant can treat 30,000 liters a day, but it has to be cleaned regularly. Salt builds up on plates, which have to be stripped, cleaned, and put back into operation quickly. Another thing that's crucial to life on board is food, plenty of it, and it has to be kept fresh. The Atlanta has its own mini reefers in the living section.
This is the bedroom. This cookie looks after everything absolutely perfect. He's one of the best I've been with. He sets everything out, he rotates, he keeps his storerooms immaculate.
A key member of the crew who's hardly seen and seldom heard, but is crucial for harmony on board, is the cook. He orders and prepares all the food and has to come up with a menu that'll keep all 22 men of varied cultural backgrounds happy. 22 meals 3 times a day, 7 days a week. And he does the washing up. For the captain, sharing meals with the crew is about far more than just the food.
One of the beauties is to bring them all together, to sit down and eat together. And you make them feel part of the team. If you don't have a team, you can forget this life. You must work as a team.
If there's ever a time when a good team spirit is needed, it's tonight. The ship is entering dangerous waters. The security level has been raised. The South China Seas are busy with all sorts of craft. Many are small fishing boats, miles from shore. Some, however, may not be at all interested in fishing. Pirates trawl these waters, looking for the ultimate catch.
Heading on 308, sir.
Well, they're there. You don't know where they are, but they're there. They're watching all the time. So it's a threat. We know that threat.
Official figures show there can be 3 pirate attacks every 2 weeks in these waters.
Third mate, I've got 2 targets here. And these guys that come aboard, if they can get aboard, they're ruthless. They'll kill for the US dollar.
Modern pirates don't wear eye patches and don't carry daggers between their teeth. Today, they carry machine guns, AK-47s and M16s, and travel in high-powered speedboats.
252, 3 miles. We're a soft target. We're easy. We're not armed. We're just easy. They know that. Starboard 20. Starboard 20. Hello aft, hello aft.
Bridge, number 1 mechanic, reporting.
Yeah, this is Bridget. We've got a target now. He's moving at 32 knots. He's coming down the port side. If you see anything, let me know. This is the captain. All crew members to your pirate stations. All crew members to your pirate stations.
The crew have to be ready to defend their ship. The pirates have one of 2 aims. either to take the crew hostage or, more commonly, to steal any money or valuables that might be on board. The pirates' strategy? Attack the ship's blind spot. They head for the aft deck. This is the lowest part of the ship and the most vulnerable.
As I'm taking evasive action now, I'm going port 20, I'm going port 20, midships, midship.
If the captain can't outmaneuver the marauders, their only defense, high-pressured water cannons. Their only hope, washing the attackers into the sea before the pirates can get aboard. Luckily for the crew, tonight turned out to be another close call. The fast-moving vessel was just a fishing boat crossing paths with the Atlanta. But if it's not one threat, it's another. The wind is freshening. The seas are rising. Intense tropical storms of the typhoon season command respect and demand a response. The captain can either skirt the storms, burning more fuel and losing time, or take them head on. This time, he decides to take the risk. No matter the weather, the crews still have to attend to their duties. The reefers still have to be checked, even if it means braving winds up to 70 knots. It's in conditions like these that the power supply to the reefers could fail, spelling disaster for our precious cargo of Australian seafood. At the moment, the reefers are still working. Storms can severely reduce visibility, but heavy rain also plays havoc with navigation equipment. The squalls create unreadable blotches on the radar screen. The danger: there are times when the crew of the Atlanta are almost sailing blind. The Atlanta is weathering the storm, which is losing intensity. The captain's instinct was right, and his gamble to take on the storm is paying off. But now, she still has to make Hong Kong by midnight. The rest of her journey depends on it. It'll take the Atlanta 42 days to complete the full circuit from Southeast Asia to California and back again. It's a mega trip, even for a mega ship. In a year, the Atlanta sails over 260,000 kilometers, which is roughly 2/3 the distance to the moon.
5 miles to our next waypoint. And next
5 miles.
Yeah, 313.
313,
yes.
Our megaship, the size of an aircraft carrier, now has to navigate Hong Kong's congested waters.
Starboard 10.
At night, the bridge is not only the brains of the ship, it also becomes the Atlanta's eyes and ears.
350, 2 miles, stopped.
When a vessel registers on the Atlanta's radar, it's identified by a number, and its direction and speed can be tracked by those watching from the bridge. It's another crucial piece of technology that helps a mega ship maneuver gracefully into a mega port. Bringing the Atlanta into another of the world's busiest ports at night means this small crew have to work together with maximum efficiency once again. It's just before midnight. In any 24-hour period, as many as 100 container ships sail into this harbor. The Atlanta is the last of the day. As at all the ports on the Atlanta's route, space at the dock is tight. Container ships bustle for space in this incredibly congested harbor. In a year, over 22,000 container ships move over 20 million 20-foot containers through this port. Once alongside, the winches take up the slack. The last thing anyone wants is two megaships wrestling for space. After more than 2 weeks of travel, this is the final destination for two particular pieces of cargo. The reefer containing the Australian prawns is whisked off the ship. Not far behind is the container packed with 999 cartons of Australian wine. The containers carrying both the prawns and wine reach a cargo warehouse. This is the telling moment. The frozen seafood has passed through the tropics, crossed the equator, and arrived, still frozen after 2.5 weeks at sea. By the time the seafood has been unpacked, the Atlanta has taken on her load for America, and fully laden, she sails on. On the bridge, the captain and second mate Law plot the ship's next long journey across the Pacific Ocean. Having made a long and perilous journey of their own, all 999 cases of wine have arrived intact and on time. In a year, the Atlanta will carry over 185,000 containers at an estimated value of over $4.5 billion. The Australian seafood and wine are just a tiny fraction of all the goods that this megaship will transport around the globe. The Atlanta won't dock in California for another 10 days, giving some of the crew a chance for a well-earned break.
Don't eat everything, right? Save us some food.
Although he may not be at the helm in years to come, Captain Llewellyn, the sailor who never sleeps, trusts his young crew will be ready to steer the course of the megaships of the future.
The satisfaction I get is knowing that the boys will be taking from what I've given them, and hopefully carry on running a safe, happy, well-run ship.